Welcome to another insightful episode of Me and My Health Up. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten the well-being of others. I'm your host, Anthony Harcher. I'm a clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. This episode is on creating wealth to support your health with the founder of Wealthful, Chris Bates. Wealthful helps young families build more financial wealth to live a life fulfilled with more true wealth. Chris features regularly on the domain as a property expert advisor. Furthermore, the Australian Financial Review seeks his expert opinion on matters relating to property. Before we start, you're probably wondering why a wealth expert on a health podcast? Well, let me share you some of the key reasons. Finances are a major contributor to relationship breakdown. And particularly this time of the year, being the new year, relationships are breaking down like no other time before. So it's important that we address such topics such as finances, whether it be finances in relation to marriage or finances in relation to business partnerships. Finances are also a significant source of stress. I constantly see this uh, in my clinical nutrition support of clients. And it's a constant thing that they raise that I can't help them with. And so it's through this podcast that I can, interview an expert and help you along your journey. Money is a major talking point at home, whether, you're at home, you're at work, it's on the news all the time. And we are taught very little about it at school. And so we're not certainly, there's no manual on how to create wealth, but there's experts out there like Chris Bates. So today we're blessed to have such an expert on all things financial and wealth creation. Welcome, Chris. How are you today?
Oh, Anthony, thanks for the intro. And I can't agree more, which is probably a bit biased, but, is connecting financial health to well-being, to physical health, mental health. There is a huge connection there. And most people think that life's quite fragmented, right? I'm really fit, but ultimately you've only got one life and it's all interconnected. And, a lot of the meaning of why I became a financial advisor is those reasons you spoke about at the start, the importance of seeing it in relationships and how important getting that part of your life sorted enables you to focus on other things. But if the money's not right and you're not stressed or you're overthinking about that, there's lots of other things that sort of cascade after that. So yeah, it's a great intro. Actually, it's what I'm really passionate about, to be honest.
And how did you become I guess a mortgage broker, a property advisor? And, what was your journey into this space of passion? Because I know you're so passionate about it. We've
Yeah.
met on a number of occasions and you just exuberate passion in this area.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it hasn't, it's like a journey, life's a journey, right? And you also go through these key moments where you get, I don't know, you go through another element of growth. Without going through the full sort of life story, I guess, bounced around as an accountant, funds management, got into financial advice. And financial advice on the tin is we help people plan their life and achieve their dreams. But when you enter the industry, this was 2007, it was really just a sales industry. So for the first probably 5 years, I was very frustrated because for me, I wanted to have these big, important life chats and help clients have these like epiphanies on what their direction is going to be. But the day to day was, not the reality for most financial advisors. So I went on a personal self-development journey. I did lots of reading, went to some courses, read every single mindset sort of book out there. And really sort of battled around this meaning of money. And that was like, probably early 2010 to 2015, started my own business. The business pivoted. We stopped working with older clients just because we just didn't have that runway, that trajectory that we could, changes we made today, the blank canvas, I guess, that we could really help. So that's why I love helping young people. It's just, we know we can sort of map it out. We don't have to deal with sort of legacy problems. And it's good to be known and good at some area as well. And so, yeah, we kind of pivoted to really focus on the biggest challenge for young people. Yes, we could focus on their super or insurance, but we think the thing that gives young families the most stress is property. Just getting that first home, or, if they're in a home that's too small and they've got kids, it's super stressful. And so they can upgrade or do a renovation that they've been wanting to do. It's been sitting on their hands for years. That property discussion, what you do around your home, is a huge discussion around the table. And that's what we love to really help solve now for clients.
And I know you very specialize in that individual support, and every client's coming you with different circumstances. Is there a general thing that you always end up discussing, around the table about property? And could you share that with us?
I think a lot of it is around family planning. I think whether they're a couple without kids, I really go there. Yesterday I was with a client, I'm asking their kids, and we're just newly together. But things like that are really important. I think planning out work and what you're going to do when the kids get bigger, if you've got kids, where you're going to live. A lot of people don't want to deal with those till it's too late, and they could have dealt with that, years early, and it would have been a much better financial decision. So I think having a home they can grow into and guiding them to have those big conversations and make compromises, which everyone's compromising in some way, and making those calls today rather than it's all too hard. Guiding them through that process, it's extremely stressful. Buying your first home or trying to sell a property and buy another one, it just doesn't happen. It takes lots of effort and it's super stressful.
Yeah, and so what are some of these stress or pain points that people are encounter, and how do you work them through those significant stress points?
It could be stress because of the work situation. Affordability is a huge one. Ultimately, they might want to live in Sydney or Melbourne or something like that, and what they can afford based on is right. And so it's talking that through the stressful, what's achievable, what's not achievable. The other thing, I guess, is, just different needs for, different desires. We often see conflicting views from the husband and the wife, or the husband, they want different things. And so that can be super stressful. Even just having the brain space to make these big decisions. And what ends up happening is lots of people out there are wanting just to tick the box, right? Just get it solved, because it's super painful when you're out in the market trying to buy, and you're missing at auction and all those sort of things. So, around the property space, but, I guess there's so many other things that are stressful financially, like it's just living, mindfully. We live in a consumer world where we're always encouraged to spend, and, just getting a system in place to manage cash flow. No one teaches you that. You don't learn that at school. It's hence why the Barefoot Investor sold over 1 million copies, because people just don't know how to do those things. And so just managing the day-to-day finances in a world that's purposely complex, and cashless society, et cetera, is super stressful for people. And then also people who have, potentially, been sucked into the credit system, really. And it's quite easy you get a credit card at 18, stupid limit, you get a bit of credit card debt, and you get into this credit cycle where you're always trying to get ahead, but you're always behind. And so consumer debt is a huge problem in society that's not talked about.
And the banks are really looking into it a whole lot more when they're assessing loans at the moment. Is that right? Based on they're, wanting all the, last 3 months of statements, and really analysing what that person's spending the money in, and really critiquing. And so it's really important that consumers understand that, if they're looking to go for a loan, that they need to prepare as such.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, banks are banks, and unfortunately, the banks are a huge profitable part of the Australian economy. They employ a lot of people, and they pay a lot of taxes to the Australian government. And potentially even in 2021, there might be changes that's going to allow them to lend money easier. And all this hard work about building legislation and protecting consumers who need protection, I'm on that side of the fence, potentially could be unwound. I think ultimately the things with finances is you've always got to have personal accountability, personal responsibility, and take action for your personal situation. What everyone else does, what the world does, you've just got to focus on what you can control. And that's just same as health. It's about sort of owning your financial future, and really sort of committing to it, not allowing just society to take you on their journey, because unfortunately, you're the one who's got to do the work.
And now that we're in the pandemic, it's introduced, I guess, new variables that, we certainly haven't experienced in our generation or generations before us. How has that shifted how you're working with clients, or has it helped, or has it hindered? Please, shed some light on how this COVID-19 situation is.
So it was a bit It was luck. It wasn't skill. So we had made a sort of life change from the inner city to up near Avalon, the business was going to shift to this. This was just before COVID, and one of the benefits of the mortgage industry is it got forced to digitalize everything, and so the banks all had to. They were all dragging the chain because they want you to go to the branches, but they've all had to come up to speed. So dealing and as a business, consumers are basically picking professionals, not so much based on their location, but based on what you should be basing it on, which on their skill and their value they can add to your life. And so I think consumers have gone through that hurdle and said, well, look, I'm just going to pick the best person who that is. And they don't need to be just down the road. And so our businesses obviously, benefited from that. But also for hiring, we've just hired 2 people, well, hopefully the second one very close, in Melbourne, and we have no problems with doing that. My business partner's in Brisbane, my other assistants in other parts of Sydney, and it just allows you to hire top talent wherever they are as well. So that's a key change that COVID's allowed.
And in terms of just mapping that customer experience that, they get in touch with you, what should they expect in terms of, going on a journey with you to help buy their first property?
Yeah. So I think it's that initial conversations, really those big questions. It's not a case of, sometimes I've only known someone for maybe 7 minutes and I am asking these big questions, but it's every question we're asking is trying to help them to think through things they may not be thinking about and to start to make some decisions. And sometimes there's just too many clouds. It's just way too hazy to really know what's to happen. So what we need to do is then just think the likelihood of different options. In family, in your relationship, and then come back in 6 months' time when you've got that clarity. So it's those sort of, let's get the idea of where you want to go first. Then we can figure out what's the best option, and we can figure out what's the right property, what's the right loan, etc. Too many, unfortunately, the mortgage broking industry is a transaction industry, so it goes the other way. You go in, you tell them what you want, and then they tell you whether that's possible. They're not there to sort of go the other way and to help you think through what's the best option.
Yeah, so a bit of thinking that so planning ahead is really, where you help that couple to really set themselves up for most optimal success around, getting the best mortgage for their needs, thinking through what's the best property for their needs long term. Yeah, so it's really, it's similar to me working with a couple that wants to fall pregnant. Is there's at least 3 months where you want to be getting that optimal nutrition before they fall pregnant. To optimize fertility. And similar to your situation is that, you really want them to have very aligned goals around what they want and start thinking ahead around family planning and make sure that the first home they get is really setting them up for longer term success.
Yeah, as a professional, you would know things that they don't know, right? Just through your experience and seeing lots of clients and learning and educating. And so all you're really doing is sort of, putting these sort of flags ahead them and if it's pregnancy, exactly, it's maybe you need to be thinking about this, you know how big impact this is. And a lot of those that's what really I think good trusted advisors, any industry does. It really guides people, helps them think through things they haven't thought about, and actually advises them and actually says, look, this is the best option for you based on all the knowledge and experience. Got to be a bit careful of some people out there in lots of industries because they pretend that, ultimately to sell something. But it's that true trusted advisor, really tries to understand your journey. And what you said before about everyone on different journeys is 100% right. Like every single client we see is doing something different. No, not everyone lives the same life. They're from different backgrounds, different means, different dreams. So,
yeah, it's a big one. Is the outcomes? People are chasing something different, and so it's really tailoring that advice to help them achieve the best path towards that dream. Yeah. So just what are you seeing in the property market? I guess whilst we're in this pandemic, is it a good market to be buying your first home in? Is it something that you'd recommend someone to invest in? So what's your sort of general advice, not specific advice, but your more general observations around the property market at present?
Yeah, so there's lots and lots to it. So I think, I could probably ramble on for an hour about this, but the first thing is just to know that there's no one property market. There's a Sydney market, there's a Melbourne market, but there's not even that. There's a Sydney housing market, there's apartment market, there's inner ring houses, there's premium end. And so all these markets perform because they've all differently, because they've all got different supply and demand things. The big thing that's really changed over 2020 was, really buyer preferences. People spending a lot of time in their homes, not being able to go on holidays, has been a big conversation, and people are looking to potentially, look at that part of their life. So renovation through the roof. Lots of new people are going and try to buy new houses. So lots of demand has been created by just literally people spending a lot of time in their homes, but also because of the government. So the government has dropped interest rates to ridiculous levels, way beyond that something that's sustainable. And that's allowing people to go out and borrow money at rates that just are unheard of, right? Around 2%. And so what you're doing is, people want to do it for a lifestyle reason. I want a bigger place, or I want my first home, and they can afford to do it because of rates. And so you've got this enormous number of people sort of coming to the banks and through brokers. And unfortunately, there's very little properties on the market because people are saying, well, I don't really want to sell unless I find something that I want. And what we're starting to see, especially in areas that were really discounted because of the commute. So amazing places to live, but people don't want to live there because it's too far away from the city and commuting. So the fringes of, say, Sydney, the beaches, the Cronulla, Blue Mountains, then the Central Coast, the North of Wollongong, all these areas are going through the roof because of low rates, and people are going there with good incomes and are competing on very few number of properties available in these areas. And so that's why, places like Byron Bay are going through the roof and things like that. What we're also seeing, though, is even in the capital cities, the inner rings, people are really doing renovations and people are looking to do upgrades and things like that because rates are low. Like, well, if I don't do my upgrade now at 2%, when am I going to do it? And so, and there's still the same number of properties. The apartment market, which is a completely different beast, is unfortunately going through a really tough time. We've got lots of problems with tenant issues, no migration, uni students, there's no investors in the market. They have lost a bit too scared for quite a few years. And so these apartment markets really struggling, but the housing market, especially the bigger homes, things that can have an office are kind of doing really well. And I imagine that trend will go through in the next few years. The biggest risk I think everyone needs to know around properties is don't buy new property, which a lot of first home buyers unfortunately make that mistake because of the state government. The state government incentivizes young couples, young singles, young families to buy new properties for all these incentives. And what they're really doing is making them buy poor properties so they can get something for free. And then when they sell that property one day, it's like they realize what the opportunity cost is. And so there's lots to that sort of conversation, but if you are thinking about buying a new house and land package or a new apartment, really stop and question that decision and educate yourself on what are the risks of buying new in terms of depreciation and supply and all these sort of things.
So you're certainly a big advocate for buying established properties. And let go of all the incentives that provided by the government and all the free handouts associated with supporting the development of new property.
Yeah. And even with established, you can make lots of mistakes. You still need to be super selective, especially people who are still entering for their first property, etc. You've got parents, brothers, sisters, colleagues, people at your sporting clubs, etc., society, media, all this pressuring you. You're not successful till you purchase something. And unfortunately, then you get pre-approved and you go out, and unfortunately, a big mistake people do is they just want to go and buy any property. And yes, you might not buy new, you might buy established, but they buy on a busy road, or they buy something that's dark, or that's got bad privacy, or it's got an ugly neighbor, or the neighbor is knocking down to build 3 townhouses. Or there's all these pitfalls you can still make with established property that you just don't know what you're doing. You just kind of go in there on face value and fall in love with the styling rather than understanding what determines a good property versus a poor one. Even in any suburbs got that. And so, yeah, you've still got to, that's the thing with property. When you're buying, you've got to say no to 9 out of 10, maybe even 9 out of, 19 out of 20. Like it's very few number of properties you probably should say yes to, because most properties got something compromised about them, and some things are deal breakers, really, like busy roads.
And do you help educate your clients through this process of buying a property, or do you refer them to someone? How do you work with your clients in relation to making sure that they're getting the right property for their needs?
I've always believed in education and empowering, hence why we've got the property podcast, why I've posted stuff on LinkedIn. It's all about empowering people with knowledge. And so our process is, we see it our obligation to just jump off a call then to say things that the client may be uncomfortable for the client to hear, might question them, and may try to elevate them to a high level. That's where it's coming from. And so with property, we 100%, we want to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And we ideally want to take them all in a journey. I mean, we had a client just recently in Melbourne. He was going to, even another one right now, going to buy this brand new townhouse and didn't really understand how it all worked. And just over the space of 3 months through education, he pivoted from buying that into a great house on a great street, really nice frontage, paid a little bit more, not much, but got a much better property when he sells one day. And that's the dream outcome for me as well. It's just to take someone from buying something they just don't know what they're doing until something that's really going to work for them long term. And that's what we're really passionate about.
Yeah, and for listeners, Chris's podcast is The Elephant in the Room, and it's rated in the top 50 of business podcasts. So really successful podcast. And you want to share a little bit about what you talk about on your podcast channel?
Yeah, we believe that there's lots of people out there in industry, like experts, basically, in lots of elements of the property market. And what we're trying to do is educate ourselves and educate our listeners on certain parts of the market. We're not really people who like to talk up the market or talk it down and doomsdays or hype. We just like to focus on facts and get industry experts. So we spoke to over 150 people, lots of economists, demographers, architects, agents, auctioneers, and just try to go deep on one subject. And then hopefully our listeners can get a bit broader view of the market that by listening to these sort of industry experts.
And do you do any buyer's agent services within Wealthful, or do you outsource for that, or do you believe in buy? Yeah.
Great question. I don't believe a business like ours should be doing buyer's agency in-house. Buyer's agencies, it takes years and years to become really good at it. And so we could go and hire a buyer's agent and say, look, here's all our clients, but are we giving our clients to the safest hands? And the reality is no, because there's lots of other great buyer's agents out there that have been doing it 5 to 10 years. The other thing with buyer's agents, that's for someone you employ to help you purchase something. They're location specific. So you're a buyer's agent for the inner west of Sydney, or you're a buyer's agent for Central Coast. And so if you, for our clients are buying all over the place. So we'd have to have hundreds of, in for the business. So I believe great mortgage brokers need to have those relationships. And that's why we've spent, the last 8 years really building those. And, and as soon as we hear another great one, we go and spend time, have a coffee with them or a Zoom, and just get to know their story and where they're buying. And then we've got that other. So absolute a big believer in buyer's agents, but I'm going to put a caveat on that. The buyer's agent industry is still a maturing industry, and you've got a lot of established players that are very passionate about what they do and lots of knowledge. You've got a lot of new entrants with very little training, very little experience. And you've just got to be careful. If this is one of your biggest financial decisions of your life, which it is, do you really want to outsource to someone who's really just getting their, stripes, I guess? So you've got to be super careful who you choose from a buyer's agency point of view. Because you can't once you bought that property, it's too late to say, oh, I should have gone with someone maybe who knew that market a bit better. So just be very careful who you select on the buyer's agency.
You have a network of buyer's agents that you work with that you could certainly provide that connection for your client. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we very carefully pick who we work with. The reality is it's a reputation thing. Plus on top of we want our clients to have great outcomes. And so we're super careful who we select with buyer's agents, and lots of buyer's agents very early on, they're great people. But they, for us, they still need to get those sort of runs on the board. And and over years, sometimes we know, we meet them, we have coffee with them, we give them a bit of guidance, and then they'll come on part of our network once they've got those experience. So yeah, 100%. Sometimes we don't in certain random pockets. There might not be many buyer's agents in those areas. So yeah, but most areas we've got someone or a few people in those areas that we refer to.
And is there any closing thoughts you'd like to share with the listeners around, if they're looking for their first property or considering buying an investment property in, the current climate? And is there some hot tips you have there? Yep.
So I think for people buying a home, really you need to really understand that this is a huge financial decision, and that it's like a stepping stone, and what happens after that will give you more options. So making that first property is the key one, because if you make a mistake there, it can literally wipe you out. We've seen it where clients have bought off the plan apartments and lost everything. They've saved for 100 grand and got nothing left. So the first one really matters. And so you need to understand what's a good property, and you need to be super careful because you can't afford to make a mistake. But I also really try to buy a property that you can grow into, because if you buy something that you're going to outgrow as a couple or in a couple of years, the stress doesn't go away. If anything, it starts building as soon as you move in, because this writing's on the wall. And unfortunately, probably what you want to buy was probably a better property than you bought. And that's probably growing faster so be very careful believing you can just buy a property and keep on upgrading it. It's very hard to do that. And, really don't really think it's achievable. For investment properties, do not sort of fall just do not fall for the quantity strategy. There's so many sort of property spruikers out there. The property market is unregulated. Anyone can say whatever they want. And you can't say 3 years later, you told me this and you told me it was growth by this and it didn't. It's unregulated. So completely buyer beware. If you go out and try to buy a car, it's exactly the same as buying property. So be super careful who you employ. Avoid all new property and avoid those sort of property people who say you can buy 5 or 6 properties and all that sort of stuff. Really great properties aren't cheap, hence why they're more expensive. And you're much better off a fewer number of those than a bigger number of poorer, cheaper properties, for lots of different reasons. So,
So it really comes down to planning, talking to the experts, and methodically working through a plan that will set you up for long-term success. It's very aligned to your personal situation as well as your dreams.
Yeah, it's like property. You've got to do it well. You've also got to be investing in your personal self and your human capital and growing your income and paying off mortgages and all those sort of things. Property isn't just something you can buy and it'll double and you sell it all down. It's just doesn't work like that. And if you're looking to be sold the dream, there's lots of people out there that will sell you that dream. Unfortunately, the reality is it's a slow growth asset. It's going to take years. And it's about doing things today that over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years will be great decisions, but it's just not going to make a decision today in 5 years' time, going like, wow, we can retire and all that sort of stuff. It just doesn't exist.
Is there a particular guru or resource that you recommend to help people with that financial mindset? Or is it something that you provide as a service to really, because people would come to you with different beliefs around money, and that could be either limiting them or limiting, the conversations that they're having between one another, because one has a limiting mindset around money and the other one has this abundance, or vice versa. So how do you navigate through that, where they've both got, these differing views on money and how
it's a really good, and there's lots and lots. Yeah, it's a really good question. I've thought about this a lot, especially, 2012 to 2015. And there's lots of books that'll kind of go around money mindset and money beliefs. And I 100% see them playing out. Ultimately, some of the decisions people make with their finances, whether they spend everything they earn, or they save everything they earn, or they take lots of financial risk, or they take no financial risk, or a lot of those do, come back to very early childhood. And the reality is that how their parents dealt with money, and whether they had money or whether they didn't have money, and how was money used as a tool in the relationship? Kids know all these sort of things. And so all these things play out. And it's about understanding your personal money story and just coming to account with it and being personal, and just accepting what it is, and realizing that they might be helping you, and the parents might have really drummed in great financial values into the kids. But unfortunately, a lot of parents haven't got that education. So a lot of kids are coming out the other side with poor financial beliefs. That's probably the crux of it. It's probably just understanding your personal story, and then just knowing that it is achievable. It is achievable to potentially live a little bit more mindfully. You don't have to keep up with the Joneses. It's about looking how you spend, look where you get value, and are you getting value are you working, especially if you're doing a job, you want to have something to show for it at the end of the month. What have you got to show for all that work at the end of the month? If it's nothing and you've just lived a good life, how are you sort of improving? And I think that's a bit of an eye-opener for a lot of people. They think, especially people who earn quite decent money, I think the first thing is to do is realize you don't earn as much money as you think. we live in a very expensive society. So you might earn 150,000, let's say, and you get $9,000 in your bank account each month. So you think, wow, we've got $9,000. But once you take off your rent, now you're down to $6,000, and then you take off your living, just food, your phone, all those sort of things, you maybe got $1,000 left. And then you go and blow that, for example. So really, I think you've got to, what you're actually earning per month is what after all your sort of basic living costs are taken out. And unfortunately, it's not as much as you think. Hence why people spend like they've got $9,000, but really you've only got a couple of $1,000s a month that you really earn, because the other 7,000 is accounted for.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
And Chris, how can people get in touch with you? What's the best way to reach out and connect?
You can check out our website, Wealthful, just book in a sort of call there. Everything's sort of, we just have a chat, and that's the sort of the process there. Usually I've been quite active on LinkedIn, so add me on LinkedIn as well. It comes in waves. I'll post a lot for a period, and then I'll sort of hide a bit. And we've obviously got the podcast as well. So they're probably the main ways you're probably going to get in touch.
And I'll include all those links in the show notes, so they'll be all available for listeners. And thanks so much, Chris, for your time, sharing all your wisdom and experience with the listeners today. For listeners, if you like the episode, please like and share it with others that could also benefit. And stay tuned for more insightful episodes of Me and My Health Up.
Wasn't sure